Okay, we're going to look at the ceteris paribus conditions for supply. A lot of these terms hopefully aren't new to you. Um, you've heard them when we did demand. So once again, ceteris paribus or ceteris paribus is Latin meaning all of the things held constant. So when we're looking at the supply curve, one by itself, all we were looking at when we moved up and down the same supply curve is when we change the price. So if we hold everything else constant, nothing else is changing, but all we're doing is changing price, we're going to move up and down the same curve. But we know that things change. So what happens when we drop the ceteris paribus rule and allow other factors to change? That's when we have the shifts of the supply curve. And we have a situation here. This was our original price and our original quantity. We plotted all these on that last curve, and that gave us our supply curve. Once again, upward sloping, because as prices go up, the amount we're willing to supply goes up if nothing else is changing. So if we can make more money, we will make more available for sale, or we will have other people entering into that business because they see us making so much money. But if something does change and it causes us at each one of these price levels to either buy more or less, then we're going to see the whole entire curve shift. We're not changing price. We're saying at $15 we originally wanted $5,000, now we only want $4,000. At $12 we wanted $4,000, now we only want $3,000. So once again, prices are going down. Our quantity supplied over here, our new supply curve is going down. So we would plot all of those new points. We would draw our line, and when supply goes down, as it did here, it's a shift back to the left. It's the same as demand. When demand decreased, it shifts to the left. Same with supply. When supply decreases, it's going to shift to the left because the numbers get smaller going to the left. If we have an increase in supply, and at each one of these prices we are willing and able to supply more as a producer, then we're going to shift the whole entire curve to the right because the numbers are getting bigger going to the right. Factors that change supply. Once again, we're not talking about a change in price. We're changing something else. Those everything else remaining constant things we're actually going to change. And the first one is input costs. We know what the factors of production are: land, labor, and capital. When we increase, when we have to pay more for our workers, when the price of our raw materials are going up, when the cost of capital, our equipment, and our building, our rent, and all of that, if that's increasing and we don't change the price of our product, please understand that. Please get that in your notes. Please highlight that. We are not saying we're changing the price of the product. We're saying we're changing the price or the cost in making that individual item. So if we're talking about blue jeans, if the cost of denim goes up but we don't change the price of the blue jeans, then that's going to affect our supply. And so what happens, make sure you write this down, when costs go up and it's more expensive, since we're making less money, we're going to make less available for sale, and we're going to shift our curve back to the left. So if input costs go up, supply is going to decrease. But if those input costs come down, now at the same price, we will be willing and able to make more available for sale. So we're going to shift our curve to the right. So next one is government tools, and there are three of things that fall under the government tools. Three things that the government can do that actually will affect the supply of products: taxes, regulation, and subsidies. Taxes, we all know what that is. And we know what an excise tax is. So if the government imposes an excise tax on a business that they cannot pass along to their customers, once again, the business is not changing the price of the product, but the government is imposing a tax on the business itself. And so anytime you have a situation where your costs are going up, you're going to see the supply go down. So taxes on a business are going to cause supply to go down. If the government gets rid of that tax, then you're going to see the supply actually go up. Regulations is another thing. The more regulations there are, the less a business is willing and able to make available for sale. It just makes it more difficult. When we talked about externalities, when the government starts imposing fines and sanctions for polluting, That if they do that, then the businesses start to have to lower their supply until the regulations are gone. So regulations. Another example, when I first started teaching at Southwood, you had to have a 2-year, 2 years worth of college before you could actually sub in the schools. Now you only have to have a high school diploma. So they got rid of that regulation because they were having a difficult time finding substitutes. So once we get rid of that rule that you have to have 2 years of college and go to just a high school diploma, we definitely had an increase of the supply of substitute teachers. So we get rid of that regulation. Now if we go back and say, okay, that was a bad idea, we shouldn't have students right out of high school or people right out of high school subbing in our schools, and we go back to the 2 years, and we're going to see a drop in the supply. It has nothing to do with how much we're paying and everything to do with the regulation. And then subsidies. The picture that I have in the bottom right-hand corner is you have the government supporting the oil industry. The government supports the farming industry. The government supports wind farms and anything that goes into trying to reduce our use of fossil fuels. The government will help those people out. And so what that does is gives them a greater incentive to produce. And so anytime the government gives someone money to do something, you're going to have more suppliers in that particular industry. We can see that wind farm down over by Elwood. If an individual business had to support all that by themselves, we probably wouldn't see as many, if any at all. But when the government steps in, then we will see an increase in supply in those. So taxes tend to decrease supply, regulations tend to decrease supply, and subsidies tend to increase supply. Future expectations is the next one. If we expect prices to increase in the future, we're going to decrease supply today. And I put the pictures of these is because during the Civil War times we had inflation where the price of everything went up. And so store merchants or merchants that were selling these things, they realized that the price and the value of salt and wheat and flour and butter were going to go up over time. So what did they do? They knew the price was going to increase in the future, so they just held on to it. And they held onto it so long actually that the prices got so high that no one could actually afford it, and people started rioting. So we definitely don't want to see that. But they held on to these things because they knew the price was going to go up in the future. So if there's an expectation that price is going to go up in the future, they're not going to supply it. If there's an expectation that prices are going to decrease in the future, we want to take advantage right now of the higher price and put it all out for sale. And then the last one is number of suppliers. I'm not sure why this one is so confusing. If you have one supplier and then you add a second supplier, your supply is going to increase. If you have 10 people in a particular industry all supplying and 5 of them leave that particular industry because of prices going down or whatever, then you're going to see the supply in that industry go down.